According to recent studies, nearly 60% of people say they've stayed in a relationship that made them feel worse about themselves than better. So let's ask the question no one wants to answer. Why do we crave the very relationships that break us? Welcome back to the podcast family. And on today's episode, we're talking about toxic relationships and why we crave those. We've all heard the term toxic relationship, it's thrown around everywhere. But toxic relationships are more than just drama and dysfunction. They're emotional roller coasters that hook us, drain us, and somehow keep us coming back. So let's just take a microscope and look into why these relationships feel so magnetic, even when they leave scars behind. So, why are we drawn to toxicity in the first place? And at first glance, it seems irrational. Why would anyone willingly choose pain? But underneath it, there are powerful psychological mechanisms at work, deep patterns formed from childhood, trauma, and maybe unmet needs. People often crave toxic relationships because they mirror what's familiar, not what's healthy. Here's what research and clinical work tells us about this. If we grew up in homes where love was inconsistent, we may associate emotional chaos with connection. If we suffer from low self worth, we may settle for partners who validate our negative self beliefs. And if we're addicted to intensity, we may mistake the highs and lows of toxic relationships for real passion. So, in short, we're not craving pain, we're craving resolution, but we're looking for it in the wrong places. So, let's take an even deeper look at what makes toxic relationships so emotionally gripping. Psychologists call this the trauma bond. It's a cycle of abuse, reward, apology, repeat. Each phase wires the brain for dependency, confusion, and attachment. Now, here's an example. I'm going to give you a push-pull dynamic example. So, let's make this make sense. In other words, you're adorned one day, not adorned, but adored. You're adored one day, you're ignored the next. The inconsistency is painful, but it also becomes addictive. And how is that? Why is that? Well, because every reconciliation that you have releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter tied to addiction. So even if on one day you're liked and on the next day you're hated, it doesn't matter because now the brain has released dopamine and now it's that same neurotransmitter tied to addiction. That emotional highs become worth it to you to endure those lows. You become hooked on the cycle. Let's look at another example, drama as a distraction. Some people grow up learning that peace is boring. Yes, yes. Let me say that again. It's so powerful. Some people grow up learning that peace is boring or even threatening. When emotional chaos is normalized early in life, calmness, peace can feel very unfamiliar. So this individual, if this is you, you're going to chase the sparks, even if those sparks burn you. There are some psychological layers to that. Attachment wounds. So those with anxious or avoidant attachment styles tend to be more likely to misread unhealthy intensity as love as well. And then we have those who tend to fall into the rescuer complex. So some people believe, and this is a big one. I don't know how many friends I've had that have fallen into this. I love you all though. But some people believe they can fix or heal a toxic partner, finding purpose in their pain. And then what about the validation loop? What is this? Well, this is when someone who hurt you then finally gives you love. It feels like proof to you that you're worthy. And that is incredibly hard to walk away from. Let me tell you a story. I once had a friend who dated someone who constantly criticized her. Oh, it was constant, y'all. It's painful to watch, right? Being someone's friend, loved one, etc., knowing they're in this type of relationship. But anyway, she was constantly criticized, but she kept going back to this person. And I finally asked her, I pulled up the courage one day to ask her, because people do not, it's like they don't like the messenger when you come to tell them maybe some things aren't right. But anyway, when I finally asked her why, she said, because when he's kind, I feel like I matter. That moment hit me because how many of us have been conditioned to accept breadcrumbs of kindness as a full meal? So let's talk about the turning point, that critical moment when someone wakes up to that cycle. For many, it's just not dramatic. It is not dramatic. It's not the final fight or the last lie that was told. It's the quiet moment where they hear themselves say, I don't recognize who I've become. Maybe it's when they lie to friends to protect their partner, or they stop doing the things they love, or they hear their child repeat something toxic that they've overheard. This moment is heartbreaking, but it's also liberating. It's when the fog begins to lift. Now, in therapy, this is called cognitive dissonant resolution. And that's the moment when your values and your reality no longer align and something has to give, something has to change. And so let's go into these patterns, red flags, and healing process. And again, if this is you, this information is for educational and sometimes entertainment purposes only. Please follow the advice of your physician. Now, let's talk about some subtle red flags that may be missed in these toxic relationships. Maybe you feel like you have to earn love. Maybe you're walking on eggshells around this person. Maybe you fear being honest because it might set them off, or you feel anxious when they're happy because you're waiting for the other shoe to fall. It never lasts. Or you fantasize about who they could be, not who they consistently are. So, there are some common but overlooked toxic dynamics in this pattern because it is not always what you may be thinking. Most people think, and those are some more obvious, but most people think about obvious signs. And first thing, probably physical signs, etc. But let's start with a story I like to title The Supportive Underminer. And this is a story, and we'll call her Sophie. Sophie was a 32-year-old art teacher who had just exhibited her artwork in the local galleries. And her partner, Caleb, always told her he was proud of her, right before asking if she really thought people would take her work seriously. Now, she's already showed her work in art galleries, and he would say he was proud of her. And then he would say, yeah, but do people really take your artwork seriously? And he told her, he claimed that he was just being realistic. He needed her to be realistic. When she got invited to an out of town art show, which was a big deal, suddenly he couldn't sleep when she traveled without him. And so what did Sophie do? She canceled her trip. She canceled that opportunity. He never told her not to go, though. He just said he couldn't sleep without her. He just worried, okay? And little by little by little, her world got smaller. She didn't recognize it as toxic. That's how subtle it is. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't cheating, but her confidence shrank while his insecurities bloomed in the name of love. So toxicity isn't always aggression. It can be subtle erosion wrapped in false support. Now, here's another little bedtime story I like to title The Family That Defines You. Okay. Maria was 27 when she realized she didn't know what kind of music she actually liked. Her mother had always chosen everything for her clothes, her friends, her major, etc. Even after college, she lived at home because her mom needed her. And each time she tried to move out, her mom would say, I guess I just raised someone who doesn't care about family. Now, Maria never saw it as toxic because this was familiar to her and it just seemed like love to her. But it wasn't love, it was control masked as care. And when she started finally seeing a therapist, she had to grieve the version of love she thought she needed to earn. And so toxicity can look like devotion when it erases your identity. And I have another little perfect bedtime story for you. I like to title The Perfect Friend Who Keeps Score. Now, Derek had a best friend, Theo. Theo was always there for Derek, especially in a crisis. Theo lent Derek money, picked him up at 2 a.m. when he needed it, even got him a job interview. But it came with a price. Anytime Derek made a decision that Theo didn't agree with, like spending time with new people or setting a boundary, Theo reminded him of everything he'd done for him. After all I've done for you, he'd say, you're just like everyone else. Derek stayed in the friendship out of guilt and fear of being the bad guy. And it actually took therapy for him to realize friendship isn't transactional. Toxic relationships can masquerade as loyalty when they're actually emotionally controlling. And this is how your brain is getting hooked, because these relationships create a feedback loop of dopamine highs and cortisol crashes. And this roller coaster teaches your brain to crave the relief that follows abuse rather than avoid the abuse altogether. And so that's why breaking free often feels worse at first. You don't feel good. You're literally in withdrawal from the adrenaline, the hope, the apology. But staying means staying in a system that is going to feed on your confusion. So, how do you begin to heal? How do you begin to break this cycle? Well, first thing you got to do is recognize the pattern. And you can find many different ways to do this. One is journaling, that they say. You can start journaling after interactions. Um, do you feel drained would be a question you ask. Do you feel empowered? Do you feel confused? These patterns will show you what your nervous system already knows. The second thing that you could do is stop romanticizing red flags. This is really important because this seems to be more common than the rest that I'm going to talk about. But intensity is not intimacy. Jealousy is not love. Controlling behavior is not just being protected. Okay. The third thing, rebuild self worth outside of relationships. These types of relationships often make you forget who you were before you were in the relationships, right? Return to your passions, your people, your purpose. Fourth thing, set boundaries even if you stay. Because let's be honest, let's be realistic. Some of you will. You'll try to make changes within the relationship. But set those boundaries even if you decide to stay. If you're not ready to leave, that's okay. But start setting limits. Say no. Reclaim small pieces of power, okay? And remember, these aren't just, partner relationships. These can be family, it can be friends, etc. And of course, seek support. So important. Therapy, support groups, online communities can help you break that shame spiral, because they'll let you know you're not alone in this, and you are not alone. And when you start doing these things with time, safety, and self regulation, your brain is going to start rewiring attachment patterns. Mindfulness, journaling, somatic therapy, frequency based healing can help recondition your nervous system to expect peace, not chaos. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it means that healing is not just possible, it's physiological, it's biological. Toxic relationships don't begin toxic normally, okay? That's why they're so hard to leave. But understanding why we crave them is the first step to freedom. Because once you see the cycle, Once you know it, you can break it. Once you understand the wound, you can stop trying to heal it with more pain. And I'd like to ask, do you recognize any of this? Do you know anyone that's been in this type of relationship, whether it's romantic, family, or friendship? And what finally helped you or them see it clearly? Share your story in the comments, the feedback. Your words might be someone else's wake up call. And if this resonated with you, watch my episode on how to rewire your anxiety response, because the path to healing always starts with understanding the brain. You deserve relationships where love feels safe, where you don't have to beg for the bare minimum, where your nervous system can finally exhale. And if you're still with me, thanks for spending this time with me today on Speaking of This. And you can follow me. You can like the episode. You can share some feedback anywhere where you get your podcast. It will help other people find me. Until next time, take care of your mind, body, and soul.